Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try to cheat the system.
Cheating? I'm not sure I can legally endorse that.
Well, not in a legal sense, obviously. I'm talking about a cognitive cheat code, a shortcut. Because, think about how we usually assume learning happens.
Right, the School of Hard Knocks.
Exactly. If you want to know if the stove is hot, you touch it. If you want to know if that sketchy sushi place down the street is safe, you eat the tuna roll and just wait to see if you spend the entire night in the bathroom.
The trial and error method, which is effective, sure,
Mm.
but it's incredibly inefficient and often really painful.
Yeah, it's the rat in the maze approach. You just bump into walls until you finally find the cheese. But the research we have in front of us today, it argues that humans actually have this superpower that allows us to bypass the bumping and the burning.
We don't have to experience the pain to learn the lesson.
Right, we just have to watch.
Which sounds incredibly simple when you say it like that, just learning by watching.
Right.
But this concept, social learning theory, it was an absolute seismic shift in psychology.
It really was.
It completely dismantled the idea that we are just these biological robots responding to rewards and punishments.
And the architect of that whole shift is Albert Bandura. He has this quote that I think perfectly frames our entire conversation today. He said, "Virtually every phenomenon that occurs by direct experience can occur vicariously."
Vicariously.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the operative word here. We are going to explore how observing others doesn't just teach us basic skills like how to tie a shoe or, I don't know, drive a car.
Right.
But it actually shapes our personality, our aggression levels, and most critically, our belief in our own agency.
And that concept of agency, that's going to be our through line today. Because if we are just soaking up what we see around us, are we really in control, or are we just like mirrors reflecting our environment?
Well, it's a bit of both, as we'll see. Today, we're going to cover the famous Bobo Doll experiment, which honestly is far more disturbing than the summary you usually read in the textbooks.
Oh, for sure. The details are wild.
We'll also break down the self-efficacy engine, which explains why some people rise to challenges and others just completely crumble. And, well, we have to talk about the data on media violence, which is pretty sobering.
Yeah, it is. But before we get to the plastic clowns and the dark side of TV, we have to start with the man himself. Because Albert Bandura wasn't exactly groomed in some prestigious lab in Vienna or New York.
No, his origins are about as far from the ivory tower as you could possibly get.
Yeah.
He was born in 1925 in this tiny hamlet called Mundare.
That's in Alberta, Canada, right?
Yeah, Alberta. And when I say tiny, I mean tiny.
Like, how small are we talking?
Bandura's high school had exactly 2 teachers.
Wait, 2 teachers total?
Total, for the entire student body.
So if you didn't get along with one of them, you were essentially alienated from, what, 50% of your entire education?
Pretty much. And the resources were basically non-existent. Bandura essentially had to take charge of his own curriculum because those 2 teachers were completely overwhelmed.
I can imagine.
But his parents, they were immigrants from Poland. They had this very intense, very binary view of the world. There's this fantastic anecdote in our source material where his mother confronts him when he's a teenager.
Oh, I saw this in the notes. It's a brutal ultimatum.
It really is. She told him, you have a choice. You can work in the field and get drunk in the beer parlor, or you might get an education.
Field and beer, or books. Not a whole lot of gray area in rural Canada in the 1920s.
No, it was a very stark reality.
Yeah.
And Bandura chose the books. But the real spark for his theory, the thing that I think really made him look at human behavior differently than all his peers, came from a summer job he took right after high school.
And he wasn't, like, filing papers in an office?
No, he went to the Yukon Territory.
The Yukon, which
Right.
is rugged terrain even today, let alone back then.
It was the absolute frontier. He was working on the Alaska Highway, literally filling holes in the gravel to keep the road drivable. Just hard, brutal, physical labor in the middle of the tundra.
But it wasn't the gravel that taught him psychology, was it? It was the coworkers.
Exactly. Bandura described this crew as a curious collection of characters. You have to picture the scene here. You are isolated from civilization, and the only people around you are men who are fleeing the consequences of their past lives.
Like fugitives.
Basically, these were people running away from creditors, dodging alimony payments, hiding from probation officers.
So it's essentially a refugee camp for people who failed at the game of life.
Or people who just refuse to play by the rules altogether.
Yeah.
And Bandura is this young, sharp kid just observing them day in and day out. He later said this experience gave him a keen appreciation for the psychopathology of everyday life.
Because he wasn't seeing mental health issues in a sterile white clinic.
Right. He was seeing how people behave when they are pushed to the extreme margins, completely stripping away all the normal social pleasantries.
It's fascinating because these men were essentially trial and error learners who just made way too many errors.
Yeah.
They touched the stove too many times, got burned, and ended up filling potholes in the Yukon.
That is a great way to put it. He was watching the direct result of a lack of social adaptation, and he realized right then that human behavior is raw and it's heavily shaped by the immediate environment.
So he survives the Yukon, right? And he heads to the University of British Columbia. And this brings us to what is possibly the most accidental career path in history.
Pure serendipity. He was commuting to campus in a carpool because he didn't have his own car, so he's completely at the mercy of the driver.
Yeah.
And the other guys in the car were all engineering and pre-med students.
Oh, and those majors always have those brutal early morning labs, like 8 a.m. sharp.
Exactly. So they get to campus at the absolute crack at dawn. But Bandura's regular classes didn't start until much later in the day.
So he's just sitting there.
Just wandering the halls. He looks at the course catalog to find something, literally anything, to fill that early morning time slot so he isn't just staring at a wall for 3 hours.
He just wanted a place to sit where it was warm.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the only class that fit the schedule was Introduction to Psychology.
That is wild to me. One of the most cited psychologists in history, a man whose work changed how we understand education, violence, and therapy, only entered the field because he didn't want to wait around in the cold for his ride home.
It makes you wonder how many brilliant minds we missed out on just because they had a later carpool.
Right.
But he takes the class, and he is instantly hooked. He realizes that psychology isn't just common sense, it's an actual science. So he eventually goes to Iowa for his PhD in 1952, and then lands a position at Stanford. And this is where he decides to basically pick a fight with the entire establishment.
Yeah. We need to set the stage for this fight, because in the 1950s, psychology was dominated by one giant figure, B.F. Skinner.
Right. The father of behaviorism. If you've ever taken a Psych 101 class, you know about Skinner. His view of the world was very mechanical, very input-output.
The rat in the box?
The famous Skinner box. You have a rat, it presses a lever, it gets a food pellet, so it learns pressing the lever equals food. Or it gets a mild electric shock, and it learns do not touch the lever. Skinner believed that all human behavior was just a slightly more complex version of this exact same mechanism. We are shaped entirely by direct reinforcement.
So under that behaviorist theory, if I want to learn to be aggressive, I literally have to punch someone and get a reward for it. And if I want to learn to be kind, I have to be kind and get a cookie.
Exactly. It requires direct experience. And Bandura looked at this and said, well, that works fine for a solitary rat in a cage. But humans don't live in cages.
We live in societies.
Yes. We are constantly surrounded by other people doing things.
No.
Bandura's massive insight was, I don't need to get the electric shock to learn. I can just watch you get the shock, and I will learn the lesson just as fast.
Which brings us to the shift from behaviorism to social learning.
Correct. Bandura introduced this concept of vicarious reinforcement. It's the idea that observing the consequences of someone else's behavior is totally enough to shape my behavior.
But doing that implies that there is an actual brain involved, right? I mean, Skinner didn't really care about what happened inside the head. He treated it like a black box. He just cared about the observable behavior. But Bandura is saying there's an active process happening in between the stimulus and the response.
And that is the absolute crux of their disagreement. Bandura brought cognition back into the picture. He said there is a mediating process. We watch, we process the information, we predict what might happen, and then we actively choose whether or not to imitate it. We aren't just mindless reflex machines.
To prove this, he designed the Bobo Doll experiment. Now, most people listening have probably heard of this. It's Pop Psychology 101, but looking closely at the source material, the details are actually way more specific and honestly more troubling than the general summary you usually get.
It's considered a classic for a reason. So you have this Bobo doll. It's an inflatable clown, about 4 feet tall, and it's weighted with sand at the bottom, so if you punch it, it wobbles and pops right back up.
So it's the kind of toy that is literally designed to be punched.
True. But Bandura takes these preschool kids and puts them in a room. One group of kids watches an adult model behave aggressively toward the doll. And we aren't talking about just giving it a little shove. The adult is following a very specific script. They are punching it, kicking it, hitting it with a wooden mallet, and shouting specific phrases at it.
Phrases like what?
Things like, sock him in the nose, and throw him in the air, and pow.
Okay, so it's a full-on scripted verbal and physical assault on this plastic clown.
Exactly. Then the adult leaves the room, and the child is left alone with the doll and some other toys.
And what were the results?
The children who watched the aggressive model were twice as aggressive as the control group who didn't see the violence. But here is the nuance that usually gets missed in the textbooks, and it is by far the most important part. The children didn't just mimic the hitting, they engaged in novel aggression.
What do you mean by novel?
I mean, they invented entirely new ways to hurt the doll. They used toys that the adult hadn't even touched. They devised their own new strategies to attack it.
Wow, that is really chilling.
It is. And this is crucial because it showed that the model didn't just teach the kids a specific set of motor movements. It completely changed the child's mindset. It disinhibited them.
Disinhibited, that feels like a very dangerous word in this context.
It really is. The message the child received wasn't just hit the doll exactly this way. The message was, violence is acceptable in this room. The normal rules are suspended. Let loose.
And did it matter if the model was a real human person in the room?
That was the genius follow-up study. Bandura showed other kids videos of adults hitting the doll on a TV screen. Then he showed them a cartoon cat hitting the doll.
Wait, a cartoon cat? Like on a screen?
Yes, and the medium didn't matter at all. The results were statistically the same. Whether it was a live human, a filmed human, or a cartoon, the underlying message of aggression without consequence was the actual teacher.
Which leads us directly to the modern day. Because if a cartoon cat in the 1960s caused disinhibition, what is the internet doing to us right now? The source material actually mentions trolling specifically in this context.
It is the perfect modern application of the theory. The internet is basically a massive global Bobo doll experiment. Think about the core concept of disinhibition. It's the weakening of restraint. In the real physical world, if you walk into a coffee shop and just start screaming insults at strangers, there are immediate, direct consequences.
Right, direct punishment. Skinner would be very proud. You get social shame, maybe you get kicked out, maybe someone punches you.
Exactly. But online, you see a model, some anonymous account, post something incredibly hateful. They don't get punched. In fact, they might get rewarded with likes or retweets. That is vicarious reinforcement in action. You watch them get rewarded with attention.
So the observer sitting at home thinks, well, if they can do it and get away with it, I can do it too.
Exactly. And because of the anonymity of the screen, you don't fear the punishment. The social restraint just crumbles. The source material cites specific data on gamers, actually. Younger males who engage in online trolling very often cite boredom or amusement as their primary motivation. They're literally treating real human beings like the Bobo doll. It's just an object to be poked to get a reaction.
Is there any hope in that data, or are we just totally doomed to a Lord of the Flies digital future?
There's a glimmer of hope. The data shows that this disinhibition effect does tend to decline with age. There's a sharp drop in trolling behavior between the 18 to 19-year-old cohort and the 22 to 25-year-old cohort.
So the prefrontal cortex eventually shows up to the party.
Eventually, yes. But that window of late adolescence is a very high-risk period for this kind of modeling.
Okay, let's peel back the layers here a bit. Bandura didn't just stop at saying we watch and we learn. He was very much a meticulous scientist. He broke down exactly how this happens. If you're listening to this and you want to learn a new skill, or maybe you want to understand why you picked up a bad habit, what are the actual gears turning in the head?
He identified 3 main categories of influence that determine whether or not you will actually copy a model. Because, let's be real, we see people do things all the time that we don't copy. I see people play the accordion on the street, but I haven't gone out and bought an accordion.
Probably for the best. So what actually makes the difference?
First is the characteristics of the model. Who exactly are you watching? And here, we look for similarity. We are much more likely to copy someone who is like us, same age, same sex, same background.
That makes sense. Your brain says, if that guy who looks like me can do it, I can probably do it too.
Precisely. It makes the information feel relevant to your own life. Then there is status. We naturally mimic high-status individuals, celebrities, experts, the cool kids at school. There was a really fascinating study mentioned in the notes about jaywalking that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, I saw this one. The suit versus the slob.
That's roughly it, yeah. Researchers secretly observed pedestrians waiting at a crosswalk. They had an experimental model purposefully jaywalk, just cross right against the red light. When the model was dressed in dirty, unkempt clothes, very few people followed him. But when the model was wearing a freshly pressed, highly expensive suit,
The sheep just followed the shepherd right into traffic.
they did. People were significantly more likely to jaywalk because the suit signals authority or success. We subconsciously assume the high-status person knows something we don't like, maybe he knows the traffic pattern better, or simply that whatever he is doing is the correct, successful behavior.
That is incredible. A nice suit and tie literally overrides the law in our brains.
It completely overrides our built-in safety inhibition.
Okay, so that's the model. What about us, the observer?
That's the second factor. Your internal state matters a lot. People with lower self-confidence or low self-esteem are much more likely to imitate others. They are actively looking for a script to follow because they don't trust their own internal script. Also, your reinforcement history plays a part. If you copied your older brother a lot in the past and it worked out well for you, you are highly primed to copy him again.
But Bandura said there was a third factor, the ultimate trump card.
Reward consequences.
Yeah.
This absolutely overrules everything else. You can have a high-status model, let's say a massively famous celebrity, you observe them doing something. But if you watch them get arrested for it, or publicly shamed, or physically injured, you will not copy them.
So going back to the suit-wearing jaywalker, if he steps off the curb and immediately gets handed a ticket by a cop, the status effect just vanishes.
Poof, gone instantly. The vicarious punishment tells your brain, abort, do not copy. It instantly breaks the spell of the high status.
Now, Bandura also broke down the actual cognitive steps we go through to learn a new behavior. He called them the 4 processes. Let's run through these quickly because I think they are incredibly useful for anyone actively trying to learn a skill.
Sure. Step 1 is attention. You actually have to be looking.
Which sounds obvious.
It does. But attention is highly selective. We tune out 99% of the world. To learn, the model has to grab your focus. This is why the best teachers use humor, or why advertisements use bright colors and fast cuts. If the input doesn't get past the gatekeeper of your attention, nothing else happens.
Makes sense. Step 2.
Retention. You have to store the info. Bandura talked about 2 main systems here, the imaginal and the verbal. You mentally replay the video of the action in your mind. That's the imaginal system. Or you talk yourself through the steps using language. That's the verbal system. Like muttering to yourself, okay, lift the latch, then turn the key.
Step 3 is where I think it gets tricky for most people. Production.
Yet this is the translation of the mental idea into actual muscle movement. And this is exactly where the gap between learning and performance lives. You can watch Steph Curry shoot 3-pointers all day long. You have the attention. You have the retention. You know exactly what his form looks like. You can close your eyes and see it perfectly. But can you actually produce it on the court?
Definitely not without a massive amount of practice.
Exactly. You need the physical capacity and you need the real-time feedback loop. You shoot the ball, you miss, you feel what went wrong, and you adjust. Observation gives you the map, but it doesn't walk the path for you.
And the final step.
Incentive and motivation. This is the key that unlocks it all. You have to actually want to do it. You might know exactly how to pick a lock because you watched a tutorial in a spy movie. You have the attention and retention. You might even have the physical dexterity. But if you are a fundamentally honest person, you have no incentive to do it, so you simply won't perform the behavior.
This distinction between learning a behavior and actually performing it seems really profound. It essentially means we all have all these dormant behaviors sitting in our heads that we've learned but just never used.
You do. We're basically walking encyclopedias of behaviors we haven't activated yet. What triggers them to come out is the environment or the introduction of an incentive.
This brings us to what I honestly think is the most empowering part of Bandura's entire body of work. We've talked a lot about how we learn from watching others, but Bandura also realized that a huge part of our behavior comes from how we view ourselves.
Yes, this is the shift to the self system. Bandura didn't see the self as some mystical ghost in the machine. He saw it as a concrete set of cognitive processes. And the primary engine driving that system is self-efficacy.
I want to be very clear here for everyone listening. How is self-efficacy different from self-esteem? Because people use those two terms interchangeably all the time in pop culture. You always hear, oh, we need to build our children's self-esteem.
They're totally different concepts. Self-esteem is an emotional judgment. It just means, I like myself. Self-efficacy is a capability judgment. It means, I believe I can do this specific task.
Give me a concrete example.
Okay, you might be a wonderful, kind person with incredibly high self-esteem. You really like who you are. But if I put you in the cockpit of a 747 and told you to land it during a storm, you would have very low self-efficacy. You know for a fact you can't do it.
Right.
Conversely, you could be a world-class assassin, extremely high efficacy in your specific job. You can always hit the target. But you might deeply hate yourself for what you do. So, low self-esteem.
That is a very vivid distinction. So self-efficacy is really about agency.
It's entirely about the belief in your ability to exercise control over your own functioning and over events that affect your life. And Bandura found time and time again that this specific belief is the absolute best predictor of whether you will succeed or fail at a task.
Why is that? What does the person with high efficacy do that the low efficacy person doesn't do?
It all comes down to their reaction to failure. That is the ultimate litmus test. The low efficacy person hits a wall, faces a setback, and immediately thinks, see, I'm not good enough, this is futile, and they stop trying. They internalize the failure as a permanent lack of ability.
And the high efficacy person.
They view difficulties as challenges to be mastered, not as threats to be avoided. When they hit that same wall, they think, okay, I need to try a different angle. I need to put in more effort. I must have missed a step. They view failure as useful information, not an indictment of their character.
So if you're listening to this and you're realizing, wow, I have really low efficacy in my career, or maybe low efficacy in my relationships, can you actually change it? Did Bandura give us a manual for this?
He absolutely did. He identified 4 specific sources of self-efficacy. If you want to build that belief in yourself, you need to systematically tap into these 4 areas.
Let's go through them. Source number 1.
Performance attainment. This is by far the most powerful one. It simply means past success.
You have to actually get a win on the board.
You have to do the thing. If you are terrified of public speaking, just watching videos of great speakers won't fix it. You need to actually give a speech, even a really small one to 3 people. If you survive it, your brain logged that hard data. It says, I did it. I didn't die. I can do it again.
So the strategy is to start really small, stack the deck in your favor so you basically can't fail.
Exactly. You deliberately build a history of success. You don't try to run a full marathon on day 1. You run 1 mile, then 2. Each small win builds the psychological efficacy required for the next bigger hurdle.
Source number 2.
Vicarious experience. Watching others succeed.
The whole if she can do it, I can do it mentality.
Yes, but remember that similarity factor we talked about earlier. It is crucial here again. If you were a struggling amateur painter and you go look at a Picasso, it might not boost your efficacy at all. He's too different. You might just think, well, he's a historical genius and I'm just me.
Right, it feels unattainable.
But if you see your peer, a friend, who has the exact same talent level and training as you, if you see them book a gallery show, your efficacy shoots right up. Your brain says, wait, that is actually attainable for someone exactly like me.
Okay, source number 3.
Verbal persuasion. The classic pep talk.
Does that actually work? Just having someone yell, you can do it.
It works, but only if it's realistic. Bandura specifically warned about this. If you persuade someone they can do something and they go try it and fail spectacularly, you have actually crushed their efficacy long term. You've proven their doubts right.
So it can backfire.
Big time. The persuasion has to be grounded in reality. It's much better for a coach or a boss to say, look, I've seen you handle this kind of pressure before. You already have the skills required for this specific task, rather than just empty cheerleading.
And the 4th source.
Physiological arousal. Basically, listening to your body.
The sweaty palms.
Yeah.
The racing heart before a big event.
Right. When you face a challenge, your body automatically reacts. Heart rate goes up. Adrenaline pumps. A person with low efficacy interprets that physical feeling as pure fear. They think, I'm shaking, I'm losing control, I'm going to fail.
And a high efficacy person.
They interpret that exact same physical feeling as excitement or readiness. They think, I'm pumped up. My body is mobilizing energy to get ready to perform at a high level.
So it's literally the exact same physical sensation, just a completely different cognitive label.
Exactly. Reinterpreting your own stress response is a massive hack for building efficacy. Instead of constantly trying to calm yourself down, which is really hard, you just tell yourself, I'm excited.
I really want to look at the practical application of this, particularly in the realm of health, because the source material detailed a study about labor pain that honestly blew my mind when I read it. It suggests that efficacy isn't just a mental state, it's deeply tied to our biology.
This is where the mind-body connection gets incredibly real. Researchers studied a group of pregnant women. Before childbirth, they measured their self-efficacy regarding the labor process, basically asking, how well do you believe you can handle the upcoming pain?
And what happened in the actual delivery room?
The women who scored high in self-efficacy tolerated the labor significantly longer before asking for any pain medication. And overall, throughout the process, they required substantially less medication than the low-efficacy group.
How is that actually possible? Is it just mental grit, or is something else happening chemically?
It is actual chemistry. The prevailing theory is that high self-efficacy, that deep feeling of cognitive control, actually triggers the body to release endorphins and enkephalins. These are the body's natural, built-in painkillers. They physically bind to the opioid receptors in the brain.
So believing you can handle the pain literally creates a chemical shield against the pain.
Yes. And it works in the opposite direction too, which is scary. Feeling completely helpless floods your system with stress hormones, like cortisol. And cortisol actually amplifies the physical sensation of pain and suppresses your immune system. Bandura's work showed that our beliefs quite literally regulate our neurotransmitters.
That is just heavy. It implies that believing in yourself isn't just some cheesy motivational poster in a high school guidance counselor's office. It is a legitimate health intervention.
It absolutely is. It fundamentally alters your physiology.
While we're on the topic of biology and society, let's look at how efficacy changes as we age, because the notes mention this self-fulfilling prophecy in old age.
This is a really critical warning from Bandura's research. As we get older, obviously our physical abilities naturally decline somewhat. That's just biology. But very often, our belief in our abilities crashes much, much faster than our actual physical bodies do.
We just assume we can't do things anymore purely because of the number of our age.
Right. An older person might think, oh, I'm too old to walk to the grocery store now. So they stop walking to the store. And because they stop walking, their muscles actually atrophy from lack of use. So the physical decline accelerates rapidly.
Yeah.
The belief literally created the physical reality.
Yeah.
Bandura argued very strongly that we need to actively keep our efficacy high in old age just to maintain our baseline physical health.
Let's switch gears a bit to something that's always controversial. We talked about how we learn aggression with the Bobo Doll experiment earlier, but Bandura was very firm on the real-world impact of media violence, wasn't he?
He did not mince words on this topic at all. He stated clearly, violence is learned, period. And the mass media is a massive, incredibly effective teacher.
There's always this intense debate, though. People say, well, I played violent video games growing up and I didn't turn out to be a killer.
Right, and that's anecdotal. But the aggregate data presented in the source material is stark. There's a very clear, measurable correlation between childhood viewing of television violence and adult aggression levels, extending well into a person's 20s. And it's not even just about acting out violently, it's heavily about the numbing effect.
Desensitization.
Exactly. If you watch 1,000 simulated murders on television, your natural physiological response to seeing someone actually get hurt in real life is severely dampened. You are far less likely to intervene to help. You are less likely to call for assistance. Empathy requires emotional sensitivity, and constant exposure to violence dulls that exact sensitivity.
The notes also mention a copycat phenomenon with very specific statistics regarding boxing. This feels to me like the ultimate tragic proof of disinhibition.
This data was chilling. Researchers looked at national murder rates in the United States immediately following high-profile championship boxing matches. We're talking about the massive, highly publicized fights that millions of people watched on television.
And what did they find?
In the days immediately following a widely televised heavyweight championship fight, the murder rate increased by an average of 12%.
12%. That is definitely not a statistical rounding error.
No, it's a massive spike. And the operative theory here is disinhibition. The fight on TV publicly validates aggression. It shows two men brutally beating each other and then getting rewarded for it with money, fame, and a championship belt. It makes violence look exciting and justified. For a person who is already on the edge, that cultural validation tips the scale. The normal social inhibition against killing is temporarily weakened by observing the successful model.
Wow. So we have the problem clearly diagnosed. We learn fear and we learn aggression through observation. But Bandura didn't just diagnose the problem and walk away. He worked on the cure. He wasn't just a lab theorist, he was a practicing therapist. And he developed a way to treat severe phobias that is basically still the gold standard today.
He decided to tackle snake phobias specifically. And he didn't do it by having people lie on a leather couch and talk about their childhood dreams or analyze their relationship with their mother. He did it with actual live pythons.
Walk us through this process, because I personally hate snakes, and this sounds like an absolute nightmare to me.
The technique is called guided participation. And it relies on the exact same principles of modeling and efficacy we've been discussing.
Okay, how does it start?
Step 1. The severely phobic person Just safely watch the model, usually through a glass window, handling a live snake. They observe that the model is perfectly calm. They see that the snake isn't attacking or biting. That is pure vicarious experience. The brain registers, oh, it's actually possible to hold a snake and survive.
Okay, step 2.
They enter the room with the therapist. They just stand near the snake. Then, the therapist breaks the interaction down into tiny, highly manageable steps. They might say, just touch the snake with this thick leather glove for 1 second. Okay, great. Now touch it with a bare hand for half a second.
It's gradual exposure.
It is gradual, but crucially, it's active. You aren't just thinking about it or talking about it, you are physically doing it. That's the participation part. And the therapist is right there the whole time to support you, which taps into verbal persuasion.
And did it actually work for these severe cases?
It worked incredibly well. They were curing lifelong, entirely debilitating phobias in a matter of just a few hours. People who previously couldn't even look at a photograph of a snake in a magazine were calmly holding live constrictors. But the best part of this, and honestly this is my favorite takeaway from Bandura's entire career, was the ripple effect.
What do you mean by ripple effect?
The subjects didn't just stop fearing snakes. Their entire lives changed in unexpected ways. There's a story in the research of a real estate agent who participated in the snake study. After he finally conquered the phobia, he started selling rural properties again. He had been completely avoiding them for years just because he was terrified of seeing snakes in the tall grass.
So the therapy literally gave him his career back.
It did. Another woman in the study started wearing necklaces again because previously the feeling of them around her neck reminded her too much of snakes. But more profoundly than that, almost all the subjects reported a massive surge in general overall confidence. They realized, hey, if I can handle a boa constrictor, which terrified me, I can handle a difficult conversation with my boss. I can handle giving a public speech.
Conquering one very specific fear raised their general global self-efficacy.
Exactly. Once you prove to yourself through direct performance attainment that you are capable of overcoming deep fear, you fundamentally become a different person. You unlock your own agency. You finally stop being the rat trapped in the maze.
This all leads us perfectly to the final philosophical point Bandura made. It's a concept called reciprocal determinism, which sounds super complex and academic, but it's actually a really beautiful way to view our place in the world.
It attempts to answer the ultimate big question in psychology. Do we have free will, or are we just determined products of our environment?
And Bandura's answer is?
His answer is both. He modeled it as a triangle. Point A is your environment. Point B is your specific behavior. And point C is your cognitive processes, your thoughts, your self-efficacy.
And they all just constantly push on each other.
Right. The environment absolutely shapes you. It's like that rough crowd in the Yukon shaped the behavior of those men on the highway crew. But crucially, your behavior also shapes the environment right back. If you walk into a tense room and you smile and act calmly, the entire environment of that room changes. If you walk in and act aggressively, the room changes in a different way. We aren't just passive leaves blowing around in the wind. We are active agents who can physically reshape the wind.
We shape the world that shapes us.
That is the core of it, yes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a ton of ground today. We've gone from filling gravel holes in the Alaska highway to punching plastic clowns, all the way to rewiring our brains against physical pain.
We've learned that humans are ultimate learning machines. We are constantly, tirelessly observing, modeling others, and judging our own competence to handle the world.
I want to leave you with one final thought based on the limited domain approach that was mentioned in the source material. It basically implies that we are constantly being trained by small, highly specific inputs all day long.
Right. We aren't trained by grand, sweeping philosophies. We are trained by thousands of tiny moments.
If Bandura is right, and the data strongly suggests he is, if social learning is always turned on, think about your phone for a second. Think about your social media feed.
That is a genuinely scary thought to process.
Every single short video you scroll past, every angry political rant you read in the comments, every lifestyle influencer you watch, technically, scientifically, that is all training. You are constantly observing models. You are seeing vicarious reinforcement in real time. You see a post and think, oh, this person got 100,000 likes for being incredibly snarky and cruel to a stranger. Your brain is automatically logging that data. It's writing a rule that says cruelty equals social reward.
We are constantly being modeled by what we consume. The algorithm is essentially just a hyper-speed, incredibly efficient Bobo Doll experiment running 24/7.
Exactly. So the real question we all have to ask ourselves today is, Who are you letting model your behavior? Are you actively curating your influences, or are you just letting an algorithm decide who teaches you how to be human?
That is definitely something to chew on before you open that next app.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.